Hey, it's very hard, but it's impossible. We're going to have a book review from the book called From Genocide to Continental, which is written by Genocide in 2009. This book is talking about the Congolese conflict and the crisis of contemporary Africa. This book was reviewed by Scott Nicholas Lamiok, which is in the University of Aberdeen Department of Politics and International Relations. Civilians in the eastern part of the Democratic Republic of Congo paid a very high price during the recent conflict of the Great Lakes region. Mass killing, rape, torture, and serious human rights abuse was the order and disorder imposed by the militant and armed groups operating in that region, particularly in the province of North and South Kivu and the Oriental. Gerald Brenner's book From Genocide to Continental War, the Congolese conflict and the crisis of contemporary Africa offers a rude explanation of how the Rwandan genocide of 1994 served as the matchstick that touched off the much broader conflict that engulfed the Congo Basin. The prelude for this conflict was the death of the Congolese leader Laurent Desire Kabila, who ended the threat to year the despotic rule of Mobutu Sese Seko. Although Kabila was credited with overthrowing the tyrannical rule of Sese Seko, it was no secret that his military victories could hardly have materialized without the external military support that he received from neighboring Rwanda and Uganda. Both had their own ambition and interests, and when Kabila went his own way, particularly after his assassination, it was no longer possible to hide. It was no longer possible to hide the ambition of either. When the power struggle to fill the political vacuum created by Kabila's death started against the forces of neighboring Rwanda, Burundi, Uganda, Angola, Namibia, and Zimbabwe all intervened, igniting what came to be known as Africa's First World War. Prunier is a French historian specializing in the Horn of Africa as well as Central and Eastern Africa. He was a key figure in the French Ministry of Defense crisis unit in Rwanda, which oversaw French intervention in Operation Turquoise or in Operation Turquoise, a plan to protect displaced persons, refugees, as well as civilians in danger in Rwanda by establishing humanitarian safe zones in that country. Prunier has synthesized a preserved and a multidisciplinary account of violence that has trounced the region of Africa, based partially on his personal account of the events that have taken place in the corridor of the African continent. Prunier very explicitly addresses preparators in the state-sanctioned crimes against people's discriminatory and indiscriminately targeted, that blamed for death and burial dismissal. Unlike those who are quick to apply simple labels to this otherwise complicated and deep-rooted conflict, Prunier asserts that the events in Rwanda had profound domino effect in the region, stirring conflict in neighborhood countries that were ultimately fueled by years of intense but underlying enmity. In 1959, animosity began to surface once again between Hutu and Tutsi peoples in Rwanda, resulting in members of the Tutsi clan being pushed into exile, mostly in neighboring Uganda. In the aftermath of Idi Amin's failure to hold power from Milton Obote during the early 1980s, Tutsi emigrants became actively involved in a local war to overthrow the unpopular regime of Obote. During the early days of unrest, Yoweri Museveni became R&R of the Tutsi members in Uganda, receiving aid from them in his bid for power in own country. In turn, he helped them strengthen their one patriotic front, which is also known as RPF, which was harassing the despotic Hutu regime of Rwanda. By 1993, the RPF had emerged as a force that could no longer be ignored. When the regime of Habyarimana accepted the Arusha deal for a ceasefire and a transitional government that would accommodate the Tutsi and other opposition forces, the Hutu headlines were inferior. Following the shooting of the plane carrying Habyarimana in Kigali, those Hutu extremists and their paramilitary forces wasted no time in perpetrating the 3 month genocide against the Tutsi. The RPF saw no option but to break the ceasefire and take over power. France, a supporter of the regime of Habyarimana, sent a peace force into the region as a result. As Premier described, about 600 men and 40 officers of the ex-FARC or Rwanda's armed forces were united behind him. This him is replacing Seti Sendashonga. They were led to follow him as they could no longer stand neither for Kagame regime in Kigali nor the competitors in Army for the Liberation of Rwanda. French Army pour la Libération de Rwanda, both representing in their eyes the opposing but symmetric forms of violent racism, according to the most estimated report in the media. About 900,000 Rwandans from the topmost minority were slaughtered during only 100 days in 1994. In a move that greatly advanced the scope of the rampant violent conflict, Paul Kagame undertook an ambitious campaign against the 2 million Hutu who had taken refuge in neighboring DR Congo. The move, though sparking little concern among Western population, laid the foundation of prolonged and regionality, destabilizing conflict that continues flagging to this day. The nature of the inclusion into Mobutu's DR Congo premier reasons the structure changed as a result of the wealth of minerals located over the country's border. The author argues that the overall action soon became the first instance of post-colonial imperial conquest with the continent of Africa by another African country while completely utilizing an African manpower. In this sense, Prenia exposed several unsettling variants regarding the nature of events as they took place over a decade ago in this part of Africa. However, he falls short of delivering a compass detaining the critical event as they transpired when reflecting on Tanzania's agreement to provide training camps for soldiers wishing to reinvent Rwanda. Premier neglected to mention the true extent of their role in preparing soldiers for the invasion and the large impact that such relations had on the ongoing event of the conflicts. Why not? His general lack of clarity on his point is echoed by the ambiguities of the establishment of the camps when he states he requested me to help him enter discussion with Kampala and I arranged the necessary contact. On Sunday, 3rd May 1998, there was a meeting in Nairobi between him and Salim Saleh, President Museveni's brother. The climate Kampala and Kigali was not at its best when Salim was sufficiently open to the idea of supporting a new moderate force for it to have a chance of seeing the light of the day. Nothing that African states generally lack the means for unleashing total. Premier discussed the privatization of war, drawing up an instance of looting and other occasions for a social behavior during armed conflict. However, this would have benefited significantly from the inclusion of more announced discussion of the impact of the privatization of a war, as well as further examples elsewhere in the region regarding this trend. In doing so, Premier must be accredited with demonstrating African states' ability to not only of unleashing war but supporting and fueling war comparable to some of most destructive seen elsewhere in the world. Moreover, his exploration of this major graph of conventional military engagement does not achieve any appropriate explanation about the progression that non-members of the African community undergo when graduating from soldier to killers for pay. The author's observation of this phenomenon warrants further insight into psychological impact that is made on those being paid to kill others. Thus, an opportunity is aimed to explore the growing trend of turning children into soldiers of war in the developing world. How does ideological and cultural indoctrination prefigure in the democratic acts that these individuals ultimately take part in? Is payment for sole factors in the acceleration of genocide on the battlefield and within the community of these lands? Prunier works in spite of his multidisciplinary approach is devoid of critical literature and theories of this concept. His work would great benefit in psychosociological manner from the inclusion of such perspective and consideration, particularly given that the author linked the notwithstanding his analysis and expertise on the region and the events that changed the political, social, and cultural landscape concerning. Prino does not put forward any practical recommendation for the safeguarding of communities from the privatization of war or for the process of rebuilding the communities and family that were and continue to point on his work that the author attempt to address the ongoing conflict that African leaders fought at bravable hypocrisy only serve to discredit African community capacity to take hold of moral and act in accordance with the vision of a more peaceful and inclusive future. Although he addresses the impact the past events had on the security and stability of the countries discussed in his work, and even though he believes that what has occurred is part of history, seeing it as a part of shift to a new era of Africa, strangely he suggests that little interest will be found in implementing a solution. Perhaps one of the most naive contention present in his book is that much of the future depends on what happens in South Africa. That's a perceived anchor state of Africa peace, stability, and security. South Africa is somehow responsible and capable of solving the kind of social, cultural, and racial discord irrespective of its own internal challenges. This shortcoming aside, from genocide to continental war should certainly be seen as a contribution to the nascent pool of literature and violence and conflict in Rwanda. I am humbly thank everyone who is listening to this video, and I wish everyone to be strong, especially in this time of remembering. It will not be easy also, but we have to cope with it so that we can be strong enough. So especially a great thanks and message to survivors, towards people, guys, seniors, especially people who lost their families in this difficult time. I'm supporting with you. Thanks, keep being safe.